How long after you met her did you ask her to marry you?
Like not even an hour.
Welcome to the Internet Invasion interview. Today we're talking to Tamer Kattan, an amazing comedian. He won the World Series of Comedy. He's toured all over the country and all over the world. And he did something very interesting recently where he flew around the world, met a girl in person, got engaged that day, and married her soon after. And he's detailing the entire story on his YouTube channel called Nice to Marry You. It's an amazing story. I can't wait to talk to him. So, Tamer, how you doing?
I'm great, Gary. It's good to see your face. Thanks for the nice intro.
Yeah, no problem. You too. Where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Barcelona right now and en route to Lisbon, Portugal soon.
Oh, how come you're going to Portugal?
We think it's a good place to be after the borders start to open up. It's warm weather. It's kind of changed. All the good stuff about Lisbon has gotten more gooder after the pandemic. Like a lot of digital nomads live there, a lot of people that are starting new businesses, trying to do new things. And, Europe is really connected, so it's like Portugal to London to me is no different than living in LA and having a show in Vegas every week, or living in Vegas and flying into LA. So it's a warm weather place for us, and then still have access to the comedy scene for the rest of Europe.
Oh, great. Okay. And for anybody who watches this 10 years in the future, 20 years in the future, we're going through a massive pandemic and everybody's life is in disarray. And it's a completely different world. Something we couldn't imagine.
So weird, man.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Like 2 years ago, we would have thought this was science fiction. But, when you get the right president, he believes in science and everything goes fine.
Thank God. So, dude, there are conversations I have with my friends that literally sound like lines from a script about a zombie apocalypse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the things that we say to each other now, like, don't forget your mask, and what are the numbers like, and the borders are going to be like, those are lines from Lost or zombie movies, rather, not Lost. What's the zombie TV show?
Oh,
Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead. I always say this is like the most
like
boring pandemic, the most boring Armageddon ever. Like it's death by Disney Plus. Because there's like no asteroids, there's no zombies. It's just we're sitting at home bored out of our mind half the time.
Totally, man.
So before we get into this story, which is amazing to me for a number of reasons, what made you? How long have you been doing stand-up comedy, and what made you want to get into comedy?
It'll be 10 years in March that I've been doing comedy, and man, I mean, it's going to sound cliche, but I didn't pick comedy. Comedy picked me. I think I had, so I was really bullied a lot as a kid. I mean, it's such a cliche story, right? I was bullied. I always felt like an outcast, because I had a Muslim dad and a Jewish mom, and I was an immigrant in America. So there were so many things that made me feel like I just didn't belong. And so I learned to be funny because I had this desire to make people like me. That turned into me paying really close attention to the things that make people laugh, and how to juggle language and play with language the way artists might play with color. And then as I grew older, people would argue about whether I was a Muslim or whether I was a Jew or whether I was American. But when somebody said, yeah, but he's funny, everyone would agree. So I think it's kind of like it was my chosen nationality. To be a comedian.
I love Barcelona, though. I just moved here and I love it here. It's beautiful. The weather's amazing, the beaches are amazing, and I love seeing all of your mom's tits. It's nice to be here, especially because for us comics, this is therapy, man. I really miss, I'm an Arabic comedian. I really miss coming up on stage and occupying Jewish territory. That joke kills in Palestine. I'm not a regular Arab. I actually have a Muslim father and a Jewish mother. Did you hear that? Silence and a rumble of concern. That's perfect. That was the sound of the wedding. People get really uncomfortable. They find out you have a Muslim dad and a Jewish mom. They're like, Muslim dad, Jewish mom. What does that make you? Super circumcised. That's what it makes me. Eyes up here, buddy, eyes up here. I come from such angry people, even my penis looks like a bullet. Like one of the bigger bullets. Like the ones that go in rifles, not like a Russian lady spy in the garden. Like it's weird because Muslims and Jews are such huge personalities and I don't look like either one. It's because I grew up in a Mexican neighborhood. That's why I look like this. What I live. That's why I look simultaneously dangerous and helpful. I'm dangerous and helpful. It's like, do you know where I can find some cocaine? Yes, I do. Because I'm dangerous and helpful. I look like I work in the accounting department of a Mexican gang. I told you, save your receipts, spider! Such a weird way to grow up, because according to Judaism, if your mom's a Jew, you're a Jew. But what a lot of people don't know is that according to Islam, if your dad's a Muslim, you're a Muslim. What the fuck? I am a religion with a hummingbird is a physics I'm not supposed to exist. So all my life I grew up hearing crazy things. My dad would always say stuff like, don't trust Jews. They're not all like your mom. My mom would go, don't trust Muslims. They're all exactly like your dad. My dad hates that joke.
And for backup, you're also a boxer too, right? Or you've trained at least.
Yeah, I used to. It's funny because my dad was a boxer. He never taught me, but it was something I got into at a young age and fell in love with. I think I've always kind of been attracted to things that are really difficult or things that are perceived as really difficult, because once you're in, you feel special for being part of that group. And I think comedy is similar to boxing in that way.
Yeah. And I met you, I think, probably 7 or 8 years ago at the Comedy Store when we were doing some shows together. And
Yeah.
the cool thing about your comedy is, first of all, it was great even very early on for you. And you
thanks,
had
man.
a clearly defined style. Like, how has your comedy evolved over the years?
It's funny because I'm still me, but I think I'm a little bit. It's funny. Okay, I was in Vegas one time, and Harry Basil said to me, he goes, "Hey, you're take it easy on the poo-poo caca pee-pee jokes," and I was like, "What?" And he goes, "You're a new comic, right?" And I go, "Pretty new, yeah." So he goes, "Well, new comics start here," and then he grabbed his crotch. He's like, "Then they go here," and he pointed to his head, and then they go here, and he pointed to his heart. And I think I've gone through that evolution. I think my comedy, I think I started in my brain a little bit because I got into comedy a little bit later than most people. And then I think now it's my heart. You know, I think I'm a big believer in vulnerability. I'm a big believer in being emotionally naked on stage, and because I think it helps people. And it definitely helps me to be able to talk about the things that once bothered me or made me feel like I was less than a good person, and being able to say them on stage and have people applaud. It's like the best thing in the world. So I think my comedy is actually even more naked than it's ever been.
Yeah, and the amazing thing from seeing your career kind of fly is that you won. I was in Vegas. I went to see I just went on a vacation. I was watching like the 80s music at the Mandalay Bay. They had like a compilation of bands from the 80s, and I realized how much I hate
That's
that music.
cool. Oh no!
I know I like the rock
80s
music. I like the rock music from the 80s, but I realized like after a while I didn't like some of the other ones. And I looked at my phone and I noticed that you were doing the finals of the World Series of Comedy that night. So I bailed that concert from the Mandalay Bay, went a few blocks. So I went there and I saw you perform and you destroyed, and you won the World Series of Comedy, man. I think that night. And it was fun for me to witness that because you hadn't been doing comedy that long, and you won the World Series of Comedy. Yeah. So that's why it's so impressive that you already had your style. It was definitive, and it worked, obviously. But
Thanks, man. I
what
appreciate
was that like?
I
winning that? 'Cause
remember you being there. I remember talking to you that night and you saying you just happened to be in town. And I was like, right on. That's cool. It was good to
yeah,
see a friendly face.
yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. But what was that like? Because it wasn't an easy road to get to the finals, was it? I mean, there were a lot of people who competed in
No.
that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because my focus was never on winning. It was just, I knew that bookers got a better impression of me when they saw me live versus seeing me in a video clip. And so I thought, hey, World Series of Comedy seems like a great competition to be in because you can perform 3 different times. And every time you perform, you could do it at a club, at a good club in front of good bookers, and they get to see you live. And I felt like if I made them laugh live, that was going to be exponentially better than them seeing somebody else making them laugh over a video clip. So that's why I went in. My goal wasn't to win. My goal was to fill up my calendar and get bookers around the country familiar with me.
Yeah, and that's what a
So
lot
it
of
was
people
a
don't
surprise
realize.
for me too.
Yeah, I mean, early
Yeah.
on, people
And
don't
you know what
realize.
it's
Yeah, just that stage time's invaluable. Like the stage time is the
yeah.
winning. You know.
Absolutely. And you know what it's like? Like a lot of times you'll be on stage and you know your own jokes, and comedy is all about the surprise. That's what makes a joke really funny is the surprise that it creates when you make a turn. And you know the surprise to your own jokes. So I was watching everybody else going, wow, everybody's better than me. Everybody's great. I thought everybody was so funny because I was hearing their jokes for the first time. I was hearing my jokes for the 50th or the 100th. So it was a nice surprise for me. But I remember I just told myself one thing on the way up on stage, and it was have fun. That's what I kept repeating that phrase like it was a mantra. I just kept saying, have fun, have a great time. And I did.
That's exactly the advice I got from Dante, who runs the comedy contest, US Comedy Contest. He said, have fun. That's like the
Yeah.
key. And if you have fun, the audience has fun and they enjoy it too.
Oh, I think it's funny because I told myself to just have fun and I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted bookers to be familiar with me. When I got into the final, I think I was the only comic that had a completely different set. The set that got me to the finals, I was like, well, okay, they've seen that set. And my goal isn't to win. It's just to have them get to know me and see that I have a good hour. So then when I went up the second time, I did a completely different set. And I think it actually played to my favor.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing I noticed is you're a very prolific writer. Like you were writing pretty much
Thanks,
nonstop
man.
since. I think I ran into you a few times just on the street and you were carrying a notebook or something, like always ready for some notes or something.
Yeah, man, I carry a notebook around like that kid in Charlie Brown with a blanket. I love being a writer. I think that I love having ink stains on my hand. If I see somebody at a cafe and they have words in ink written on their hand, I'm always curious. I'm like, oh, maybe they're one of us.
Yeah. So what did you do before comedy, though?
Actually, it's funny. The job I had before comedy was advertising. I worked in an ad agency. I used to write commercials, and I worked as a strategist. And ironically, the reason why I took that job is because I thought it was a good way to get paid for being funny. I never had comedy in my immigrant brain as a potential career. But then when I saw advertising, I was like, commercials are funny. I like being funny, and here's a way to make money doing that. And so advertising kind of prepared me for comedy, I think.
It's interesting because I was a promo writer. Like I was a promo editor,
Awesome.
and then I started writing, and I think that helped in some areas. Like the same way it may have helped you is that we both had to do short form, very quick comedy because I wrote thousands of promos for like America's Funniest Home Videos and Real Stories of the Highway Patrol and a lot of and Married with Children and stuff like that. So you have to have very quick
That's awesome.
kind of lines in, and that's why I've been more of a one-liner comedian. I'm trying to evolve into more of a storyteller like you are, but like I think probably that writing really helps when you punch up your stories that are always so funny because you're putting punchlines all throughout now, right?
Yeah, 100%. You're exactly right. I think that there's a lot of similarities. I think writing for advertising or being a promo writer is like getting into the UFC, but you were a wrestler first. Yeah. So it's almost like it seems like it's a different sport, but it's not. It's all under the umbrella of storytelling. And no matter what kind of storytelling you tell, I mean, advertising to me was ideal, right? It was word economy. You had to use very few words to tell a story. It had to make sense, and the audience you were performing to wasn't paying attention, either because they had 2 drinks in their hand or because they were just waiting for their show to come back on. So it was like the perfect training ground in a way.
Yeah. Well, it worked. So, all right. So let's
Thanks,
move
man.
forward in time. And oh, by the way, well, the other interesting thing to me about your comedy is that, like I said, you've kind of known what you wanted to do early on. Where like I felt like every year I have to reinvent myself, and I've tried to do different things. And I think I'm finally finding it. But like I did crowd work one year, and then one year I focused on one-liners, and one year I wanted to be the biggest a-hole, which doesn't work for online anymore because everything's recorded now. so it's evolved, but we're finding it.
That's great, though. I mean, that's how you find your voice. You experiment and you play and you see how things feel. That's great.
Yeah, but one thing is, when I was experimenting with being the biggest a-hole on stage, like some girls I like would come out to see the shows, and that was a good way to end it quickly with them. So speaking of girls, okay, so we were early on in the pandemic. We were doing some online stuff, some like roast battles and things like that for the fun of it online. And we would watch 90 Day Fiancé because it's just so entertaining and such a different lifestyle. And we would kind of bag on those people like, oh, that's crazy stuff. Yeah. And now you end up being like the 1 Day Fiancé instead of the 90 Day Fiancé.
Totally. It's so crazy, dude. It's so crazy. I feel like
so
I'm
how did
living
this
90
happen?
Day Fiancé. Well, speaking of experimentation, I did not plan this. It wasn't like a masterminded thing at all. It was more like I was paying attention to what my body wanted me to do. Right? And New York is a killer city. Don't get me wrong. It's still my favorite city in the world. But New York is not a great city when you have to stay inside your apartment. It sucks because the apartments in New York are not made for people to stay indoors. They're made for you to live outside in that city. And man, when quarantine first started happening, the lockdown was really hard. I felt like I couldn't breathe almost. And I had a trip planned to Spain and I couldn't take. And I found out Bumble had a feature called Passport where you could virtually travel around the world and be based in Barcelona or based in London or based in Paris. And when I was a kid, I didn't have a lot of money, and that's the way I used to travel. It was my version of window shopping is I would use the internet and watch videos and stuff and be like, oh, that's what it's like to visit Germany. And I'd plan trips that I couldn't afford yet, And so when I was on Bumble, I used Passport. And I was like, I'm never going to meet these girls anyway. So screw dating apps and screw all this stuff. I'm going to write the anti-dating profile. So I just wrote, hey, I'm not going to show off. You're not going to see any shirtless pics because I'm chubby. And I'm in my 40s. And the reason why I'm single is because I suck. And I'm immature. And sometimes I'm selfish because I was an only child. And I didn't learn to figure that out. And I'm a comedian. And I care about comedy more than I care about anything else. And I just suck. I'm defensive. I'm argumentative. I wrote down everything, and I even had this section which said, "Here's why girls have broken up with me." And I went boom, 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 and I listed it. And obviously, I'm sure it turned a lot of girls off. But for Anna, I think she was like, "Whoa, this is different." And so she messaged me back, and she wrote her version of that, and told me why she sucked. And it kind of set this precedence for us where we became so fucking honest with each other that after just a month of what started as a conversation over text grew into a phone call, turned into FaceTime, and those deeply, deeply honest conversations led to me, after only 1 month, feeling like she knew me better than anybody ever knew me, besides my mom, And so it was completely by accident that we both were emotionally naked in front of each other and simultaneously ended up realizing how much we hid our true selves to strangers.
And so you've never been married
that
before.
Was a big, no, never been married, never had a long-term relationship before, really. I mean, I've had relationships that lasted several months, things like that, but never had a long-term relationship. I think being a comedian sometimes is like being pistachio gelato. Like the sample is delicious, but after half a cup, you're like, this is disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, the comedian lifestyle does not lend itself well to long-term relationships.
No. It's like being a single dad and comedy's your kid and it's a shitty kid.
So you went from 0 to 60 big time because like you went from never being married before to finding a girl that you really liked online.
Yeah.
And wait, how did you communicate?
Well, first it was over Bumble, and we went straight to a phone call. Hey, let's hear what your voice sounds like, type of thing. And the same day, that night, and I was like, oh, I'm going to give it a couple of days. I don't want her to think I was too anxious to speak to her the next day. But she ended up calling me the next day, and then we started doing FaceTime. And next thing you know, I had a pretty easy schedule. We were both home all the time, so every morning I'd get up, I'd run, and I started running home faster and faster so I could call her sooner. I became a good runner.
You're training. And then you flew all the way around. So where did you fly to meet her? And because I know you ran into some big hiccups on the way there.
Yeah. So initially we picked a date. The laws were loosening up, and you could fly into Barcelona if you had proof that you had the antibodies. And I already had COVID in March, and she had it too. So I took the test. I had a piece of paper that proved it, and I went online, filled out a bunch of information on the website with the government in Spain and Catalonia, and I got this QR code. But they stopped me at the airport in LAX. They're like, "You can't go to Spain." I'm like, "Yes, I can. Here's my QR code." And they said, "Well, let us call London." They called London. London said, "Yeah, as long as he's got that code, he's fine." Flew to London. Got on the next flight to Barcelona, got to Barcelona. At the border, they stopped me and say, "Oh yeah, they changed the law. You can't, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm here to see my girlfriend." And they're like, "No, you can't." I'm like, "But here's my test." They're like, "Oh yeah, that changed." And I go, "When?" And they go, "Last night." And I'm like, "Well, I was in the air." And it didn't matter. They took me through the airport. They picked up my luggage, took my phone, took my passport, wouldn't let me message her, put me in a jail cell where other people that weren't supposed to get in were put in this jail cell. I spent the night in jail. They didn't give us food. It was bad. It was like, as an American especially, I was like, wow, this is my freedom being taken away. And one of the worst parts is I looked out of this caged window and the view was a Starbucks with people walking out of the airport. So I was like staring at people with freedom, Yeah. And then she called me. She ended up being stuck at the airport too because they wouldn't allow, you're not supposed to go to the airport. You're only supposed to go there to pick up people that arrived. And since I didn't arrive, they wouldn't let her into the arrival terminal. And she got stuck at the departure. So she got stuck, took a taxi back to her house. We ended up talking all night. The next day they flew me back to London, and in London I had an 18-hour layover. All the hotels were closed and the internet went down. So I literally sat in a chair with nothing to do and just sat there and kind of planned, like, what are we going to do next? So then we found Gibraltar, which was like the Las Vegas of Europe, not owned. It's its own independent country, but a really small country. Like you could walk the whole country, and we found Gibraltar and we agreed. And a week later, we were totally paranoid because a week later we were going to meet there. And every day we were watching the news. See, the numbers are going up. We get all anxious, but flew to Gibraltar, met her there. And as soon as I walked through the airport window, I even thought in my head, like, do I kiss her? Do I hug her? What do I do? And then she just jumped into my arms and kissed me. And so I'm like, I'm asking her to marry me right now.
How long after you met her did you ask her to marry you?
That like not even an hour. I waited till we got to the Airbnb.
Wow.
I asked her right there. Yeah. And then
That's amazing.
we were supposed to get married 2 days later in Gibraltar, but because of COVID, even FedEx and DHL that was shipping our copies of our birth certificates so we could get married because they needed the originals, even those flights got delayed. So instead of being there for 2 days, we were there for 2 weeks. And during the 2 weeks, I thought she was going to have to go home without me, and I was just going to live in Gibraltar until we could get married, because once we were married, they couldn't legally keep us apart. Yeah. So that was the plan. And then we walked across the border. Instead of going through the airport, we walked across the border into this little town called La Linea. And then we got in the car and we drove 18 hours to Barcelona. In 2 days, we stopped in an area called Malaga. And in Malaga, we had a really nice dinner, got an Airbnb, and then the next day got into Barcelona. Your face is amazing right now.
well, I'll tell you why. The reason this is such an amazing story to me is because, so I got married 10 years ago. 11 years ago, I was only married for a year, right? And since then, I've been not nearly as committal as I was before. I mean, I've dated a lot of girls and stuff, but I haven't committed because I know you just think of all the problems that you could have, and you don't take the risks, and some of them like Trump, and I couldn't deal with that, and so every number of reasons, like I haven't been committed to somebody like that. And then it's just amazing to hear the story of somebody you met at the other side of the planet that you went to see, and you were willing to commit so quickly. And that's why it's such an amazing story to me, because I've been like anti-committal for a while and anti-commitment for a long time. And this is very inspirational
Me too,
for a lot
actually.
of people. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
But also,
to hear. I was very anti-committal too. I was done. Like I was the cliche, right? Which is when you stop looking is when you find someone. And I don't think that language is right. I think it's confusing. I don't think it's when you stop looking. I think it's when you stop trying to be something that you aren't, right? And that happens at the same time as when you stop looking. I stopped being an ambassador. I just started being me. Not the best me, just me. And when that happened, all of a sudden, I started saying things to her I didn't say to anybody. And that's when I felt like, wow, I told her all the things that were terrible about me, and she's still right in front of me, and she still tells me that she thinks I'm great. And that was like, that made it easy, you know?
Well, that's the opposite, because normally people are trying to put on this facade and hide all their flaws or whatever, and you kind of put them all out there, and you said, okay, this is me. The bar, this is where the bar is, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you're not going to.
Exactly. As is. An as-is sale. No returns.
And she put hers out too, and you guys basically, you said, okay, none of these things are deal breakers, and then you came together, and then you were willing to commit at that point.
Yeah, and man, it's not like it's easy. It's not perfect. You know, there's a witness in my life now. You know, and like the last episode we had was her saying, "Yeah, you yell at the TV a lot, and you come across as an angry person." And I'm like, you know what, you're right, and I need to work on that. But I didn't notice that before because I didn't have a witness in my life.
And that's the other interesting thing is that I saw that in the last episode you posted that she was calling you a hater and you're on a 30-day path to make yourself a nicer person, which is a massive conflict with comedians. Because like as comedians, we take off that filter, we call people out, we do a lot of stuff. So how's that going so far?
It's great, man, because here's what happens. I still do it, but now it's like it's even more special. Now I do it, you know, it's like not taking your job home when you're a cop. Like I can be a comic on stage, I can still be sharp-tongued, I can still be honest about the things that I see, but I do feel better by making a conscious effort to just be a nicer, kinder person.
Yeah. That's good. Good
so
all
it's
around.
it's working. Yeah, it's working.
Yeah.
I'm happier. I'm smiling more, and you don't realize it. You know, I think like before I met her, man, if you looked at all the TV shows that were on my TiVo or whatever you call it, man, they were all violence. It was all like UFC fights and boxing matches and angry talk shows, and then I met her, and it's like Queer Eye for the Straight Guy and like home makeover shows and like families that love each other. And I'm like, this is a nice mix.
And do you guys both watch 90 Day Fiancé now?
Yeah, we still do. We still dig it.
And
but we feel it, man. Like I relate to them a lot more than I ever have because like, I mean, I feel like I'm in an episode of 90 Day Fiancé the other way.
Exactly.
You know, like it's cool to be the foreigner. You know, I immigrated from Egypt to America, so kind of immigrating to Europe from America is a different experience. You know,
yeah,
it's bizarre.
Oh, well, that's the other thing that's amazing to me. It's amazing to like travel around the world and feel free to move from one
Yeah.
country to another. Have you always felt like that, or was that motivated by her that you wanted to go to a different country and have a different lifestyle?
Well, we weren't 100% sure where we were going to go. We just knew we wanted to be together. And she really didn't have an interest in being in America. And so, we just didn't know. She was open to it though, and she loves comedy. She's a huge comedy fan. She's literally got a Mel Brooks tattoo on her forearm. So, like, she was open to it. We both stayed open, but, we had lots of conversations. And I think our final decision may be not to go back to America first, but to try being in Europe a little bit first
Wow.
and see how that goes.
What do you see for you guys in the future? What are your goals from here on out? We're going to follow you on your YouTube journey,
Right
your
on.
channel. But what do you see as
Well,
the future?
I think now nothing's set in stone just yet, but I think we want to go to Lisbon, Portugal, and my mom wants to come out too and get a place, and I think the cost of living there is great. It's a really cool mix between old world and new world. I mean, Lisbon's one of the oldest cities in Europe, but it's also simultaneously one of the most progressive and has one of the largest digital nomad communities. So there's a ton of people with like an entrepreneurial mindset. There's lots of new technology right now. Like, I've always heard stories about the Wild West, but I've never known what it would feel like or been able to imagine what it must have been like to participate in that. And there's something about COVID hitting reset on my life and feeling like this is a fresh start in a way. And maybe if I'm going to start it in Europe, then let's start it from Portugal. I already have, a fan base in the UK and in a few other countries in Europe. So I thought, let's give it a go in a warm weather place where the cost of living is low and there's good people. And it's the third safest city in the world. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
On a list where America's 121. Ugh.
Wow.
So yeah, I thought, let's give it a go.
And what did your family think of this whole thing?
Well, it's just my mom now. My dad passed away like 10 years ago, but my mom just wants me to be happy. I'm really lucky. I mean, my mom is super cool, really open-minded. She knows that I have kind of an adventurous spirit. But once she met Anna and talked to her, she was like, "Oh, you made the right decision." My mom is very much an instinct person, and she's like, I really do think she's partially psychic. I really do. And she just fell in love with Anna immediately. And I think for her, the idea of leaving America is scary, but I think she's open to it. I mean, the world is less different than it's ever been. It's so similar now. Like I used to visit England and come home with shoes that no one ever saw, and I'd bring back music that no one ever heard. It's not like that anymore. I think the possibility of moving, like even in Barcelona, it's not hard to live in Barcelona, not be perfect at Spanish, and still be able to function in society. I think it's getting easier and easier. And to be honest with you, dude, I've never believed in the concept of countries. Like, I think country is just another name for company. Like, they give us a service and we give them our tax dollars as payment. And if I don't like the service that I'm getting, then there's nothing wrong with trying out another country. You know what I mean? I think I think Socrates was right. I'd rather be a citizen of the world, especially now, than citizen of just one.
Well, the interesting thing about now is that this pandemic has brought the world together in a way because we're connected now more than ever. I've been doing comedy shows with comedians from all over the world now, online.
Yeah.
So, as bad as this has been, there's some good things to come out of it, including you're finding the love of your life and traveling the world.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, it's an amazing time. And I mean, through this pandemic, we've all been kind of reevaluating our lives anyway, because we realize that
totally.
Certain things are a lot more important than others. Like, money is really not the end all that it used to be, because we realize we might not survive anyway if we're not careful. And
totally.
it's been a very interesting time.
I feel like I fell in love on the Titanic. You know what I mean? It really does. Like,
yeah, just don't go down with it.
Oh my God, I love you. Yeah, exactly. We're just
you
gonna
both
all
can
need
fit
to
on that
down
raft,
some life
okay?
vests.
you both can fit on that clock thing or whatever. Unlike,
Exactly.
Rose like leaving Jack in the water to But yeah, so thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us about this. And we're going to follow along on your YouTube channel. Nice to marry you. It's a great name. And yeah, and we'll talk very soon.
Right on, dude. Thanks so much for having me. And dude, you should know something. You're such a kind comedian. You always give people compliments.
Oh, sorry.
But you do. You're always so cool to everybody. You've never had like a mean competitive or jealous energy. You've always just been someone that loves comedy. And I don't know that you realize you're a fucking great comic, dude. Even when you were going through your experimental stage, every time if I saw that you were in a room in the belly room or in another room at the Comedy Store, I always stopped. I'm like, oh, Gary's going to go up. And I would make sure that I sat and watched because you're great. You're a really great comic. And I'm sure whether you think you found your voice or not, you found your fans. There's a lot of people who think I'm not the only one. So I just want to make sure that that's on your podcast too.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's funny because when I went through my real a-hole phase on stage, there's some people who love that. So
sure.
That's the thing about comedy. There's really something for everybody. Like some people love crowd work. Yeah. Some people love storytelling. Some people like one-liners, and so we can experiment and stuff, and it's always it's an ongoing process, like stand-up comedy. But the fun of it for me is just making people laugh, because there's no better feeling than making a lot of people in a room laugh and knowing that you've brightened their day a little bit.
100%.
It's the best feeling in the world. Comedy and walk people too, so that goes the other way. But I think that's why we
insult
all love
life. I'm an insult comic in life and a nice comic on stage.
Really happy to be here with you guys, because if I would have known when I was younger that I'd be over 40 one day trying to get Instagram followers, I would have killed myself a pretty long time ago. You got kids? How many? 3 kids. Oh, and you're here. That's it. I think what do you do? Everything in threes? I like all the Instagram models who post photos of like tits and ass followed by an inspirational quote from Gandhi. And just because you got a great ass doesn't make you Aristotle.
Yeah, she's a playmate, right? Yeah. Okay, we had sex a long time ago. You probably don't remember. You probably don't remember because you weren't there at the time. But if you were there, it would have been the best 15 seconds of your life, okay?
I saw Jennifer Lopez. I gotta tell you, her performance is not half-assed.
So thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us, Tamer. It's an amazing story, and I hope it continues to go great. And
thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah, thanks a lot. And for anybody listening, subscribe and like and comment. It helps so much. It's kind of our new business. We're trying to grow it, and we really appreciate the support. And I really appreciate you having me on. It's super nice of you.
Oh, no problem. Oh,
thanks,
cool.
Gary. Good to see you, man.
Soon. Yeah, you too.
All right, bro. Talk to you later.
All right,
okay, bye.